Hey, welcome to another episode of the Life Matters podcast, where we discuss the matters of life because we truly do believe that your life matters. To my left, we have Pastor John, and you know me, of course, Pastor Devon, and it's just us two today, man.
Yeah, it's just us.
There
It's
you go.
just us.
There you go. Maybe it'll be boring. Maybe you guys will keep tuning in here.
We ran off the others.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They
right.
enjoyed it,
That's
but they had
right.
to take a break from us.
That's
so
right. That's
you
right.
get to hear us talk today. So we'll try to keep the conversation lively, but
That's right.
I think the topic itself will carry.
I think so.
I
think we'll be good.
Oh yeah, because
I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So if you didn't catch that, we're talking about worry today. It's pretty much we're covering a past sermon that happened recently where we talked about future worries and discussing what Jesus spoke about and what he taught to his disciples and to the church. And as we get into that those details of the text, I do want to ask, John, when you think about the future, what comes to mind?
I think when I hear it said in that way, like think about the future, it does kind of induce my mind for, I don't know, maybe it's because we're on this topic, but it induces my mind to think about like some of the stuff that could go wrong.
Oh, sure.
I think about like big term future of like the world and wars and scenarios that are outside of your control. And maybe that's kind of where my mind primarily goes, like outside of your control.
Yeah.
You know, I try to be a planner in my life to know what's coming up, but there's so much you just can't know.
I think when I hear the word future, what comes to mind immediately is I just think about the things that are important in terms of what's happening ahead. So I think, all right, kids getting ready to go back to school and things like that, or my wife, she's a teacher, getting ready to get the school schedule back in order and getting a rhythm again. So things like that where I'm like, I kind of look forward to it.
Okay.
Because then I see, okay, like there is a sense where I can kind of predict where, okay, we have something to look forward to, and what do I need to do to prepare for that?
Right. Yeah, I guess when we kind of think of the future, our minds can go to two very different scenarios. Those things that we are looking forward to and those things that we fear or that are outside of our control. Even as you mentioned school, I'm like, oh man, school starting back.
School supplies.
Yes. Yeah.
Some people wear uniforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those things. Oh, getting to know teachers, that's another thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Getting the kids to school on time.
Yes. Making sure they brush their teeth. Those things like that. See, those are the little details that when you can start thinking about the future, and again, this could be for anybody who's going through just different seasons of life, whether you're a grandparent, parent, or just a faithful member of the church. You just want to wonder what's happening next.
Right.
What comes next? What do we look forward to next?
Right.
Is there an event? Is there something? Not necessarily looking outside and trying to figure out if there's trouble, but thinking about, all right, there's something's coming and I want to be prepared for it. Or if I'm not, then how do I?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoyed this topic that I was able to dive into in that sermon, because worry or anxiety, especially as it pertains to what is coming up, what can we not know or not necessarily be fully prepared for. I think it's a common thing amongst all people that we all battle with, that we all deal with. When we use the word like anxiety or worry, I think that we can quickly just jump to clinical descriptions of those things, and I think that's something we need to spend some time talking about. But it's not just those things. It's the day-to-day that everybody experiences, and I think that's why Jesus particularly takes some time. It's not just the extreme cases. It's something that every single one of us deals with, and in fact, I think as we kind of unpack it, that we'll find that the more we deal with the day-to-day, the smaller things, the healthier impact it can have on those bigger things, on even the clinical side of it.
Okay, so I don't want to spill any details because if people go back and watch it, they can. But if not, you mentioned just a glimpse of clinical anxiety. If there is something medical, or there's something of that nature, you mentioned it towards the end, and then you kept moving.
Yeah.
But just talk about and go in detail a little bit of the difference between, or the relationship, actually diving into the relationship between that clinical versus what Jesus is getting to here of the everyday worry. Is there a tension there? Is there a
Right.
what was Jesus getting at?
So where we were at in the sermon was Luke chapter 12, and Jesus is kind of talking in particular to his disciples. So we know that what he's referencing isn't something that's just like, oh, if you don't have faith, then you deal with these things. He's talking to people who have faith in him, who have trust in him, who do have confidence that he has his hands on the future.
Okay.
And so what we can kind of take away from that is like what he's going to talk about in terms of worry is something that's going to apply to every single one of us. But as he unpacks like these worries of the day to day and the moment by moment, he talks about things like, don't worry about what you're gonna eat, don't worry about what you're gonna drink, don't worry about what you're gonna wear, and he says like the body is more than food, and life is more than clothes, and these kind of challenges, and then he reminds us that God cares for even the flowers and even the animals. But all that to say, I mentioned it just kind of shortly in passing, kind of toward the end of the sermon, of when we're talking about these things, we're not suggesting that if we just kind of apply a few traits, that medical issues just won't be there. I know plenty of people through counseling, through personal relationships, who struggle more with a clinical side of these things. What I can say about the relationship with them is, one, I believe these things do still have a healthy, strong, and significant impact, even on people who are dealing with clinical sides of anxiety or depression and things like that. I can't take the role of a medical doctor. That's not my kind of doctorate.
Good enough.
But I can say from the experience, when people deal with the spiritual issues, it has an impact even on some of those medical things. Secondarily, I believe that what I've observed is many people, before they get to a place of the clinical side, oftentimes it is going through the daily worries, the daily anxieties, the things that come along, commonalities of life, or putting themselves into situations that maybe anxieties or worries are induced a little bit more, such as tons of time online or like scrolling on your phone or whatever it might be. And oftentimes those medical things, I'm not saying all the time, oftentimes, they are associated with not knowing how to deal with worry in the first place. And so our minds kind of get almost like miswired. And you know, I would equate it to similarly to somebody who might struggle with diabetes as a result of years of
neglect,
like not having good practices in physical health or diet. Now, that being said, there are people who just something happens with their body, just diabetes just happens.
Yes.
It's not a result of something that could have necessarily been avoided. But I do think it's important that many of these things, before somebody gets to a place of like clinically kind of being where our brains aren't producing the things that they were kind of designed to produce, I believe that when we focus in on what God says about worry and anxiety, it could stave off a lot of those issues for so many people. Again, I'm trying to stay in my lane.
Absolutely.
Not get into the medical diagnosis side of things. But I do believe that God does incredible things. God still does miracles. And I put it in there in the sermon of, I don't want people to ever feel guilty or bad or ashamed, because I do think there can be a spot where people almost feel like God has to miraculously heal me. And sometimes medication is necessary. Some of the people I counsel, some of the people I just have close personal relationships with, use medicines for some of these things because of, sometimes trauma induces something, or just whether physical trauma, emotional trauma, spiritual trauma kind of induces something where people are still dealing with things. So I'm not saying medicines shouldn't.
So it is an avenue, but it's
Right.
not the avenue.
Right. I think if somebody just doing those things, like when they get to that spot and they like that's the only way they're going to handle it, I see they tend to just kind of go down a deeper and darker hole over time if they don't take care of the spiritual things. And by taking care of the spiritual things, I believe sometimes maybe we can avoid that hole in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's good. I see, just coming from pastoring kids and being a part of teenagers and their lives, I can often ask them just very practical questions. If I see them a little nervous or they're worried about the future, they feel like they don't have control over their situation or circumstances, I can ask them practical questions of, all right, so give me your daily routine.
Yeah.
What are you doing when you have time to yourself? What are you doing? What are you doing in your free time? And they can tell me, scrolling my phone, or I'm just comparing myself to other people on social media or things like that.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, so you had no social interaction with anybody else whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying that what you just mentioned is really important. Just because it is there, I love that Jesus mentioned this to his disciples, because that means worry happens in everybody's life.
Right.
And his followers are not excluded from that. So go into detail for this here. I want you to see if you can answer this question. That means Christians, people who follow Jesus, who have faith in Jesus, a sincere, genuine faith, their struggles are not uncommon to man. Is that what you're going to?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, the scripture tells us that Jesus' struggles weren't uncommon to man.
Yeah.
And so certainly the disciples' struggles weren't uncommon to mankind. And I mean, just think of the things that he points out there. He points out that what you might eat, what you might drink, what you might wear, which are things that we should care about, things that we should be prepared for. And so, one of the things I try to draw out in this is not worrying doesn't mean not preparing. Like, we talked about school coming up. I can't just not get my kids ready for school and be like, oh, I'm just not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
To not worry about that, I need to be prepared for that. And to be prepared for that, I have to trust that God has control over the things that I don't. And so there are certain things that he's not saying don't plan for it, but instead, I love Jesus says, okay, don't worry about what you're going to eat, drink, wear, all these things. God's going to take care of you. He loves you. But he shifts the mentality. He says, seek first the kingdom of God.
Yep.
And so I think that's kind of that challenge of, okay, what is my heart seeking? Because if I'm seeking God's kingdom, then part of seeking God's kingdom for me in my own life is caring for my children. That is part of God's kingdom.
Yes, caring for what He has given to you.
He has given me an authority and an opportunity to love my children. And so in loving my children and seeking His kingdom, I'm going to make preparations for them to be able to be ready for school, which is going to reduce the anxieties about what's going to happen when they're in school, because one, I'm prepared. Two, because I trust that God holds the future in His hands, not me. And so I think that there can be a great misconception about, like, don't worry. It is kind of just this, like, lackadaisical, kick your feet back, give it no thought.
Yep.
And instead, he's challenging us to actually prepare just in a different way.
Yeah. And to your point of that lackadaisical, then we get to the other side of the spectrum where worry can kind of consume our future. And I mean, I'm not trying to be a wordsmith. I'm not anywhere near biblical scholars, but the word Jesus uses for worry, it almost is the fear of phobia. Like we all have, we hear of arachnophobia, like a fear of spiders.
Do you have any of those?
No, I don't. I do not. I wish I did.
No phobia.
Well, maybe,
All right,
maybe a theory would be a theory. I'm going to test this now.
Right.
I have to see one. I have to see a dog. I have to see, because I don't have dogs around me.
Okay.
I don't. So I mean, my mother-in-law has dogs around her, but I'm like, we don't go see them often. So
I've got one that I would.
One.
Yeah.
I bet I know it. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So one, I'll start with one that I actually don't think is, but one that I kind of enjoy. I enjoy that I'm afraid of heights. So I like, I do.
Okay.
I enjoy like getting up somewhere high. I went skydiving, you know, like getting up on a ladder or something. There's a tension there.
Adrenaline that happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of enjoy the adrenaline.
Fight or flight?
I don't know what that's. I don't know if there's any spiritual significance to that at the moment, at least. But my actual one, my real phobia is tight spaces.
Yes, I knew that. Yes.
Yeah.
I say,
Like people, you know, they'll have like caving videos and stuff like that. I can't watch that. I can't watch it. Like even being in a sleeping bag, it like zipped up all the way. Nope.
Wow.
No, I need that thing unzipped.
okay, this reminds me of the time when so we have an elevator in the church, and anytime it shakes, John trembles. I see it now. Yes,
I do. It's there. Yeah. I used to struggle with elevators a little bit more. I would just kind of like stare at a wall if it was like real crowded, and tight spaces. No. I'll be the first person to like have a mental breakdown if the elevator stops.
All right, so make sure we don't.
You'll have to pull out the sermon.
We don't have to hijack.
From outside the elevator.
Slide it through.
John, don't worry about anything.
Push it through the ceiling if we can.
That's right. I will. I'll be doing some Mission Impossible trying to get out of there. Actually,
good.
This happened one time.
Okay.
Not to me, but to my wife, so Kristen, and my mom, my mother-in-law, and one or two of my girls. I don't think it was all three of them, but one or two of them. They were in an elevator on vacation, and Kristen messaged me, and she was like, "We're stuck on the elevator," and
wow.
I ran up and like found the elevator that they were in, and it was like stuck on a floor, and the door just wouldn't open. And I felt like such a hero. I grabbed the doors and I kind of yanked them open. They opened up. Yeah, I was like, this is my moment.
That's great.
And so I opened them up, and like the heat came out of it, and I was like, all I could think is like, their body heat, it just like produced. And
yeah.
One lady, she was the first person out. She just like ran by. She didn't say a word. She just like ran by. She was gone.
Oh my gosh.
I bet she's never ridden an elevator.
Yeah, that's it.
And so, but I mean, I think even in those kinds of moments, I mean, it's silly to kind of talk about, but there is this sense of we're going to encounter things that are going to be realistic opportunities to worry, and we're going to have to kind of come back to some of this stuff of, okay, how do I stay calm when everything inside of me wants to panic? How do I find joy when everything inside of me wants to be sad? How do I combat emotions? Because I think emotions are valuable. Emotions are important, but they have their place.
Yes.
You know, like I view them much more like a thermometer. They kind of let you know what the temperature is, but they shouldn't control the temperature. Like if the thermometer says, man, it's really hot in here, then I'm going to go over to the thermostat and I'm going to turn it down. And so I think sometimes we allow ourselves to get driven by emotions rather than allow us to react and respond to our emotions in a healthy way. And so I think that's one of the things that Jesus is kind of pointing toward, even as he continued in the discussion. It wasn't just don't worry, it was don't worry because you can focus on the kingdom. And when you think about the kingdom will not be destroyed. His kingdom, not our kingdom will, or it can.
You mentioned that in the sermon a little bit.
Yeah.
Go into detail of our kingdom. I thought that was interesting. Because what came to mind was, when you're at a beach and you build those little sand castles.
Oh, yeah.
And then the waves just come in and and knocks it down. You're like, oh, like I took so much time to build that.
Right.
That's what came to my mind when you mentioned
I think that's good.
Our kingdom.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, because our kingdoms at best are temporary. Yeah, like the stuff we build, like, last year I was able to travel along Paul's journeys, see some of the places that the Apostle Paul went to in the first century, sharing the gospel with people. And remarkable cities, but they're all in ruins now. And that's one of the fascinating things. Over there, like, there are so many ruins. And even you go to, like, great cities like Rome and stuff, and they have these these buildings that, in America, an old building is, a couple hundred years old.
Yes.
They're like, oh yeah, this building's 1,000 years old or whatever, or 2,000 years old. And yet all of them eventually become ruins, or they're dilapidated structures that require like
that's a nice word.
That's
a nice word. Nice. Word of the day. Nice.
But they all fall apart eventually. But none of them last. These great cities that we read about, at some point, either the structures within them were destroyed, or they fell apart, or whatever it might be. Even the best we can do is temporary. And so we have such a we're zoomed in on our lives, and so we kind of build these kingdoms of, all right, what's going to happen with my kids going to school, or whatever each person might be dealing with, my kingdom, my job, my situation, my emotions for today,
my ambitions,
right. Even like little things like the weather for today can impact me, or right now the World Cup is going on. People can the highs and lows of how their team does. And yet, when we kind of really pull back and realize, like, oh man, most of the stuff that gets us worked up is insignificant. It does not matter. Like, I'm a huge sports fan, and I think back to, like, who won the national championship last year, year before. And sometimes I can think of it, but oftentimes, at best, I have to, like, really think on it. And those are things that I would say, like, I care about.
Yeah.
Like, it matters to me. And yet, they're so insignificant at the end. They don't matter. And so as Jesus is kind of pointing to these things, he's like, okay, I want you to focus in on things that will last, that do matter, because when we turn it into being about our kingdom is guaranteed to disappoint at some point and not last. And so, if my life is a vapor, then I want this vapor to be attached to something that will last, to actually have value.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's good. We get to the part in the sermon where you start talking about being ready for God and just being ready for when God will show up. And you mentioned even there are people who they look for, since they know, okay, like if Jesus' kingdom is going to last, there are so many conspiracy theories and so many estimations as to when Jesus will come back and when he will not. The Y2K calendar, we know that, the Mayan calendar, those things, and people will even say, all right, at this date, at this time, when the moon turns this color, he will show up again.
Right.
And you mentioned that people are crazy, and I agree with you. I do. But in that, I want to go into the root reason. Why do people feel like they need to understand or pinpoint? Why people need to have an end date for some reason? Why do you feel like people need to have a pinpoint as to when the world is going to end, or when they can prepare, when they can do their own thing? I don't know.
Right, because I think the need, or our interpreted need, to be in control. Because if I know, then I get to really be in control. And so a lot of people view a lot of what Scripture says, especially when we're almost into a different subject, but Jesus brings it up here. He talks about the second coming. When people look into, like, the book of Revelation.
Yeah. Revelation, like you said, I like that. One revelation.
But when people look at that, and I think people get particularly fascinated by this book, and it's very interesting, but I think the reason why is because people primarily view it as a book that's going to tell us the future. And so it's almost like this, magic 8-ball, shake it up. What's going to happen? Tell me what to do. And at least my interpretation of Revelation, and what I believe is biblical, is Revelation is not primarily, not that it says nothing about the future, but it's not primarily a book about the future. Revelation is primarily a book about the spiritual things that are going on now, in the past, and in the future, to show us that God is in control even when things look incredibly like they are falling apart from our perspective. And I think what John does so often is he kind of pulls back this curtain in Revelation, where he's often not seemingly describing physical things that are happening, but showing the spiritual reality behind those things. And so I even look to one of my favorite ones to use in the description of that is Revelation 12, where it describes the birth of Jesus. And if you kind of look at Revelation 12, you'll see like it talks about like dragons and
Yep.
this woman on a run and
Stars.
yeah,
Falling.
and so like it's really confusing, but like when you actually kind of begin to interpret it, all of a sudden you see, okay, there's Mary, and there she's on the run, and you see this dragon chasing her. You're like, oh, that was the devil, and the devil was really upset about this whole birth of Jesus thing, and yet when we read, like when we do the Christmas story around Christmas time, we're not usually like, hey, there's the dragon, and here's Mary with all the stars on her head, and so when we see the physical thing, John kind of pulls back the curtain. He says, John, the writer of Revelation.
Yeah. Not you.
Yeah, not me. John pulls back the curtain and he says, okay, here's what was happening spiritually kind of behind the scenes. And so in moments we see like what seemed like a simple thing was actually very like, I don't want to use the word chaotic, but there was a lot going on spiritually.
Yeah.
And so, we see kind of Jesus is born. We see Herod is chasing after Jesus, and we can overlook, man, there are spiritual things going on. The devil was trying to attack, and he was doing everything he could to stop this plan, but he had no actual control. But I think that's the beauty, is that as much as, when we read Revelation, as much as he can attack, he has no actual control that God doesn't allow him to have.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about that. That everything, and this is good to think about, everything the enemy does, he can't see the future.
Mm-hmm.
So everything he does is reactive to what God has already planned.
Yeah, that's good.
So when we live in a constant state of fear or worry, we're really just reactive.
Yeah.
And that's actually the enemy doing his job in robbing us from actually trusting in God's plan. We know his plans for us are not to leave us nor forsake us. Also his plans are to give us hope for a future. So God knows what he's doing. But when we actually live in a state of reaction and not in a state of, I can trust God and prepare, we start to see that actually we're robbing God of his glory. Because we're not trusting him. So that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense we're falling into the same trap that the devil fell into of trying to dictate the future rather than trusting God with what he has to come, what he has planned.
That's good. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that when people think of like the second coming, this one's actually a little bit, I was a little bit young for this, but there was a book, if I remember correctly, the name of it was 89 Reasons Jesus Will Come Back in 89.
Okay. Wow.
And
okay.
So when I was still pretty young, and you were,
no,
you were still a hope for the future.
Yeah.
But
Storehouse.
But yeah, this book came out, 89 Reasons. I believe that was the title of it. It was based on the year.
Somebody fact check us on that.
Yeah. You can, if not, it was like the number of the year and the number of reasons that Jesus. And then it's just kind of like, nope, he ain't returned in 89. And so when people try to do this, and I gotta mention the sermon, Jesus doesn't know when he's coming back. Like if we think we're getting some knowledge that Jesus himself doesn't get, being God in flesh and now restored back to the Trinity in heaven, if even the Son doesn't get this information, certainly we don't. And so when people read Revelation as like almost like a code book that, okay, we just got to decipher it and then we'll figure it out, that wasn't the point. Like if God just wanted us to have this information, he would have just given us this information. Actually, I look at it so much like the first coming of Jesus. He didn't tell them exactly when. He told them enough that they would be prepared to trust him when it happened. And actually, the more they tried to figure out every single detail, the more they got wrong. And so when Jesus does show up, they're like, this isn't what we were expecting. Yeah. This isn't how we deciphered it. This isn't what we came up with. And their kingdom began to crumble because they were looking for the wrong kingdom. They were looking for their kingdom, their nation, their authority, their power, rather than God's authority over all things, God restoring all nations unto himself. And mindset. I feel like we're almost in a whole. This is quickly turning into an end time.
I was saying this
podcast.
is interesting.
Don't worry about the end times.
Yes,
that's where we're going to go with this.
Well,
one.
I'll say, but now as we get into that,
Uh-huh.
and you mentioned this a little earlier, the daily decisions, the small decisions that we can focus on in order to trust God in the details. Just give some practical examples of somebody's like, man, like, okay, where do I start? What do I do with? I'm just getting up, or I'm watching this when this was released, and I'm like, okay, what am I first doing in my morning? What am I doing? What are some things that I guess is a better way of saying it are disruptive things that okay, this doesn't take away from me. This actually is glorifying God and acknowledges what God wants to do in my life. So help people see that.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important, and this is where I started in the sermon, is setting our minds. Set our minds on the things above. An intentionality to, I'm not just going to react to what's going on. I'm going to prepare my mind to respond to what God is going to do. And so when I can set my mind from the start of the day, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so important for people to take time. I'm not a morning person. You know that.
Yeah.
I'm not a morning person. I don't enjoy the mornings. Like people, like some of you, like maybe you're listening to this in the morning and you pop out of bed and you're just like, the birds are chirping and the sun's up. And I get up and I'm like, I don't enjoy mornings. I'm a night owl. I mentioned that in the sermon when it talks about maybe Jesus coming back at 2 a.m. I'm like,
you're there.
Yeah,
You're good.
That's good. I'm ready for that party.
Yeah.
But then it also mentions maybe he's going to come like
at 5
5 in the morning.
Yeah.
So, but when we get up, when we start our day, I think intentionally preparing our minds, not of here's all the things I need to do. I'm just going to have positive thoughts, but like, God, this is your day. I love the psalm. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Yeah. And so
Psalm 118.
Yeah.
Yep.
And seemingly a psalm that Jesus likely sang right before he went to the cross with his disciples. So
yeah.
Beautiful statement in that psalm. But kind of setting our minds to, okay, I'm going to prepare for this day to be a kingdom day. God, your will, not my will. God, your desires, not my desires. And so when I can kind of set my mind on that, and then as I'm going through my day, considering the practical implications of what I'm doing. Who am I trusting in? Where am I looking for hope? Where am I looking for satisfaction? And so in a practical sense, man, that's caused me to cut out a lot of things in my life. I am rarely on social media. Because for my life, this is good. I don't want to apply what God has placed on me to every single situation because I don't know. That's not my place. But for my life, I have found that primarily social media has had more of a negative influence than a positive influence. It tends to be used more as a tool of the enemy rather than something to uplift God's kingdom. And so I am rarely on social media because I don't find much value in it. And so for me, trying to maintain a kingdom mindset, in the details, it impacts, okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time there. And here's one of the ways I got there. I just evaluated, how do I feel after I get done with social media? It didn't even have to be like an overt sin or something that was like, I'm doing this terrible thing. It was simply like, I'd get done like with social media and I'd just be like, I feel like, whoa.
I'm drained.
Yeah. I'm tired, I'm worn out, I'm not happy. And so I've found myself in plenty of situations of just taking time to evaluate, how does that make you feel? And here's one of the things that I actually think maybe is underrated. I think we overlook how much we are designed by God, for God. And so when we find our pleasure in Him, it actually brings satisfaction and joy and meaning and hope, and I feel good. And when I seek to find my pleasure and my joy in something apart from Him, not just those overt sinful things, but when I'm seeking to do it apart from Him, I tend to find myself like drained and worn out and worried and anxious and all of these things. And so it causes me to like reevaluate, okay, what am I going to do with my time? Am I going to spend my time watching this or doing this or whatever it might be? It also drives me toward things that are good. Like, oh man, I feel better when I have great conversations with friends. So I'm going to prioritize doing that. Even when something, my flesh inside of me is like, no, I just want to be alone. I don't want to see anybody. I'm going to go have a conversation with a friend because I know the value. I know how I'm going to feel at the end of it. I'm going to make some decisions based on what I believe is beneficial for His kingdom, which then is beneficial for what He allows me to have.
Okay, so that means even you mentioned good things. Even good things can be a distraction then.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean,
apart from God.
I think I shouldn't say we. I think it's easy to become obsessive with minor things in life. Even something like exercise. Exercise is a great thing. Exercise is something I should do more of. I went for a run the other night.
There you go.
I did.
But prioritizing that under, okay, God, like, I shouldn't go to exercise in the middle of the day if it's during the work day.
Right. Yeah, skipping out on work to go exercise would be a problem. Or like, I mean, here's one of the realities of something you and I've talked about: finding time for it, but making sure that we don't neglect our families in the process.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and there's a balance there. There's figuring it out. Every single one of us is given 24 hours in the day. We figure out what to do with that. And so finding that balance of, okay, I'm not going to neglect my family. I'm going to be there for them, but I'm also not going to neglect my body, because then I'm not going to be able to be there for them.
Right.
Or my body's going to feel drained. I'm going to lack energy. And so kind of finding that balance, I think we can go to extremes very easily. I enjoy sports. I think sports can generally be good. I also find it very easy to just, I could probably watch sports all day, every day, and be pretty in the moment satisfied.
In the moment, yeah.
And then I'd get done and be like,
Yeah.
At some point, you lack productivity. You're not. And I find some value in even knowing about some of these things, because it gives me conversation points to have with other people who are interested.
Sure, building relationships. Yeah.
Right. But there's a point at which it's like, okay, no, there's no real value to this anymore. And so finding those balances to, is what I'm doing beneficial? Is there something that I need to shed out of my life? And I think for many people, even getting down to, I know we just said, like, hey, some things are not necessarily bad or good. They're in a healthy sense of how are we approaching it. There are also things that are just bad. I mean, realistically, there are people, there's so much online that people find themselves getting pulled into. You talked about dealing with teenagers and stuff, and talking with people in general. There is so much online that will drag people in that is, sinful. There are many patterns to our minds that are just sinful. There are activities that people get caught up in and feel locked into that are sinful.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it is because it, things like being consumed by drugs and alcohol, like, alter our minds in an unhealthy way, or
entertainment,
entertainment,
adult content,
inappropriate use of sexuality, and kind of across the board.
Yeah,
the Bible gives some clear descriptions of that. Sexual relationships are a sacred thing between a husband and a wife, and so kind of anything outside of that is problematic. And so some people, they kind of run into these things and they want to find joy, and they're trying to find joy in these things that God forbode, and then we find ourselves almost like Adam and Eve in the garden, where like you're surprised, like, oh man,
Yeah.
That's Adam and Eve's reaction. They do this thing, and then they realize they're naked. They feel shame, and I think people run into that. They're like, I do this thing, and then I feel shame, and I think the misconception can be what can happen is people eventually, with all forms of sin, people can do them, and they feel shame, they feel shame, they feel shame. And I had somebody ask me this question the other day. They're like, well, what about people when they just don't?
Oh,
And I
man.
said, well, I think what can happen is people get so used to doing this and ignoring the voice of God that we kind of turn off that sensor to it. But I believe that even when people kind of turn off the feeling of shame, or like, okay, I'm just not going to feel good, there's still something deep down where anxiety and fear and worry start to well up, and maybe we can't pinpoint it, but like sin does something. It has, there's a chemical reaction kind of going on, and so I think guarding ourselves from sin is one of the best things that we can do to combat worry and anxiety. To extend forgiveness for sin that has come against us.
Yeah.
It gives us freedom from worry and anxiety. That's not easy. I know we talked about that in a previous podcast, the challenge of forgiveness. But extending forgiveness has a way of calming our worries and anxieties, because even in doing that, doing what we said earlier, it's letting go of my control so I can trust in God's control. So, yeah, I mean,
Was there anything else in the sermon that you're like, man, like I wish I had more time in it, but I didn't get details? Anytime next question.
I don't know that I wished I had more time.
I said this topic's hard, man.
It was a challenge, and there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't get into. Some that we were able to kind of dive into, and I think we're just kind of hopping on the top of some waves here.
Yes.
The end time stuff is interesting, and Jesus talking about his return is fascinating. There's some stuff that I didn't get into kind of toward the end of what Jesus was saying there, where Jesus is talking about being faithful with what you've been given. He's challenging the disciples, be faithful with what you've been given.
Yep.
And he,
grotesque picture.
yeah, he paints a pretty rough picture that I didn't really have time to dive into, of people who just fail to be faithful with what he has given them. And he's not just like, I'm disappointed. He's like, I will punish you. That's one of the things as a pastor that like jumps out at me. It's like, as pastors of the church, we are not only held to a higher standard in terms of we better be careful in what we do and how we can, but like if we fail to do what God has called us to do, there is punishment. And punishment is not always a bad thing. I think obviously within Scripture, one of the things that we find beautifully is that discipline is the act of a loving Father. And so,
Yep.
one, God is willing to discipline us in his love. But two, we don't like to talk about this, and man, we're right here toward the end of the podcast. I'm just kind of throw it in. There are consequences for failing to respond to God's goodness in whatever capacity that is. Somebody who rejects his goodness altogether and will spend eternity separated from him.
Yeah.
Even though he offered Jesus as a free gift. He offers salvation as a free gift, responding in grace to him in our faith to him. But there are consequences for those who reject him. And even for believers, there are consequences when we reject him. God is loving, God is patient, but God still allows this sense of justice, especially as it pertains to in this world. He still allows this sense of justice to prevail. So while all sin is ultimately sin against God, there are certain sins that are going to create a greater consequence in this world. And so he points to those who have whatever they have under their care, there are consequences. And the consequence is somewhat based on what did you reject? What did you fail? And so, man, like I know as a father,
Absolutely.
if I fail as a father, the consequences of that aren't just on me. It impacts my children.
Yeah.
It impacts those people that I love with the greatest affection. And so, yeah, I mean, I hate kind of tossing that in here right as we're wrapping it up.
We always have a little extra time.
That's right. That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
A lot of spirit in the word, brother.
Yeah.
It's good. So when I remember that question we talked about, what comes to mind when you hear the word future? Hopefully this is good news for us. We can either see the future as doom and gloom, or we can view the future as an opportunity to bring glory to God in all that we do and say. And I think that's the beauty of Jesus, again, referring to his disciples, his people. They know him, they belong to him. He knows them by name, they know him by name. And as we think about the future and things that we have to take care of in the day or in the day tomorrow or whatever it may be, may we use every opportunity to not give a foothold to the enemy, but also to make the use of every day.
I love that. The opportunity.
Yeah.
The future is an opportunity. Every day is a gift. What are we going to do with it?
Yep.
And so, hopefully, I know we hit on a lot more than just worry and anxiety, and so maybe this is our little hodgepodge podcast of worries, anxieties, end times, and consequence.
There you go.
But hopefully for people who might be struggling with worry and anxiety, this is an encouragement, and that we at the end of the day can just trust God with the future.
Amen, brother. All right, Life Church, you know the drill. Please, please, please go to your mission field.